What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Pesky Report presented by Beyond the Monster. I'm Jordan Leandre, joined by Tim and Brian. How you boys doing tonight?
Great.
I'm chilling.
Good.
Brian, it's nice to finally meet you.
Sure. Yeah.
Can't wait to give you the Irish goodbye at the end of this episode.
I like your glasses, Tim. They're catchy. There.
Yeah. Tim looking a lot like David Hamilton, who was a star of today's Red Sox game. Of today's Red Sox game that they ended up winning 12-2 against the Angels. This is going to be MLB centric, but we're going to open with the Red Sox because we're primarily a Red Sox podcast. So they finished off a series win in Anaheim, taking 2 of 3. The last time we recorded, they had just finished this series in Seattle. They also swept the A's, so they are 5-1 since we last did our MLB show. Big bounce back win today after losing last night at the hands of the Angels in embarrassing fashion. But they, like I said, bounced back the game before going home, and they're now going to be 7-3 after a West Coast trip to start the season, which is a big polar opposite from the last time they started the season on the West Coast when they went 3-8 back in 2019. Brian, I'll start with you. What are your thoughts on the series specifically, and I guess the West Coast trip as a whole?
I think early on, like last podcast, it was like, is the pitching going to be good enough? I was worried. I was like, oh, they're going to hit. And then all of a sudden it was, oh, yeah, their pitching is great because, it is. But, I mean, they're getting, 5 innings out of guys or 4.5 innings. But a couple of those games where it was like, you lose by 1 run, you're like, all right, come on. And then, with Story being out, not that he was really on fire, but it's another right-handed hitter not in their lineup. And then you start to think, well, what would happen if Reese McGuire wasn't the team leader in RBIs? What would happen if yeah, I know, right? That Tyler O'Neill, I think he's got 5 home runs now or something crazy. I mean, he's got quite a few already. And it's the right-handed bat. They're going to struggle against lefties, but against righties, it seems like they're going to be okay. But today was great because it was kind of like I was just waiting for that game where you're like, oh, you just kind of relax, and it seemed like everything was kind of going right for them today.
Yeah, Tanner Houck's catching all the run support so far. The margin of victory in his 2 starts right now is 9.5 runs. They won 9-0 against Oakland last time out, 12-2 today. But it wasn't always a blowout today. I mean, they were only up 3-0 going into the middle innings of the game. I know McGuire ended up hitting a home run that really separated it, I believe in the 7th inning. But it was not a blowout. Like, Tanner Houck had to buckle down, had a couple of jams that he had to fight himself out of, and he ended up going 6 innings again today. And, like, similar to the A's, like, the Angels lineup is not full of world beaters. They have Trout, they have Taylor Ward. I mean, the corpse, I want to call it, of Anthony Rendon. They have some decent names. I mean, Miguel Sano is back in Major League Baseball, but their lineup isn't full of studs. But his ability to get through the lineup twice and then start the 3rd trip through and get you through 6 innings to shutout ball for the 2nd straight time. The whips were down compared to Oakland, but 17 strikeouts, I think, 2 walks and like 7 hits in his first 12 innings this season. So he's passing the test so far of being a starter. I know a lot of people wanted to point to the fact he couldn't go, 2 or 3 trips through the order. So far, so good. Tim, what are your thoughts?
Dave Bush needs to be taken to the bathroom and given a swirly and a disgusting dirty toilet.
Yeah,
because I mean, I know this series we didn't generate a lot of whiffs at all, like nobody did, but I'm sure they were probably just tipping pitches. But genuinely, it's night and day difference. How many of these guys we were like, can they start? Can they start? And they're all passing the fucking test.
Yeah, so far so good. I mean, Cutter and Whitlock, neither of them got through the 5th inning in the previous 2 nights, but I think they combined for only 2 earned runs allowed. So, oh no, they didn't give up any earned runs last night. So 1 earned run between the 2. So even when they're not giving you, length, they're still getting you, quality innings. Whitlock was fighting it last night, didn't get a lot of whiffs. I felt like they may have been tipping. Like, I thought Whitlock threw some really good pitches last night that they were able to either fight off or lay off. And maybe it's also the fact they're not throwing many fastballs. I didn't double check the usage on Whitlock's pitches last night, but just there was a lot of pitches, specifically to Mickey Moniak. I felt like he had 2 at-bats where he had like 8 or 9 pitches, and he just fouled out like 6 or 7 in a row, and they were all breaking balls. So maybe as we get further into the season, they'll start trusting the fastball a little bit more. Who knows? But Yeah, the difference is definitely night and day, from Andrew Bailey or from Dave Bush to Andrew Bailey, and through 2 trips, still, I think they're the number 2 team now in ERA behind the Kansas City Royals of all teams, um, in starting pitching ERA. But the big star of the game today, I other than Reese McGuire, was the man that is Tim's profile picture right now on StreamYard. David Hamilton was awesome today. He made the error on that first ball that was hit to him. I think it was actually scored a base hit by Miguel Sano. He hit it like 112 miles an hour. I would have probably ruled it an error. It was hit right at him, but he went 2 for 4, hit his first major league home run, had another single later in the game, and then worked a walk. And he did strike out twice, one looking, but 2 for 4 in a game that a lot of people were probably pissed when they saw his name in the lineup this morning. I know last night after the loss, everyone in a Red Sox group chat that Tim and I are in was like, and we get to watch David Hamilton play tomorrow. So already, queuing up the sad violin music for to lose 2 straight. But he was awesome today. Reese McGuire was great. Cedar Rafaela came up in the pinch in the 6th inning for Willie Abreu. He had a triple and a 2-run single. They really separated. And it was the bottom of the order that did a lot of the dirty work, which is really nice.
I thought it was nice that he made that error, and then you're like, okay, and then I think he turned a double play like right after that. I think Hamilton did. So they talked to him after the game on the radio about it, and he's like, that's like the best thing when you have an extra, you're not dwelling on something. So he's like, I did something kind of negative, kind of positive, however you want to say it. And then on the radio, I don't know if you heard this, Jordan, but they were saying because of the exit velocity, I guess this year in Major League Baseball, that the balls that are hit over 100 miles an hour, they're giving the players a hit instead of an error because they think it's challenging. Or that's like they say that's like the mark. Anything over 100, where it'd be like, no, it's an error. You're a Major League Baseball player. You should make that play. But they're saying because of the exit velocity, they're giving those guys hits now because they go, oh, well, that's a difficult play now because they have a metric to look at, and that's kind of that was their thinking to giving them. The ruling of where everybody else kind of who doesn't understand or doesn't see how fast it came off the bat exactly like, well, no, you have to make that play.
Yeah, that is kind of weird. I don't know how I feel about that. I mean, there's definitely going to be so there was a ball hit in the Oakland series, I think, that ate up JD Davis. I was at like 104 miles an hour, but he was playing on the grass. Not being able to react to that, I understand that being a hit, but I mean, David Hamilton's playing back in the normal shortstop position. That ball was hit on the screws, but it didn't take a tough hop. It was just hit right to him. I mean,
right at him.
I don't know.
Hey, Jordan. Counterpoint. How about you stop being an asshole and let Miguel Sano get a hit?
No, I want the Angels. I want the Angels batting averages as a whole to suffer. We already saw it with Nolan Schanuel earlier in the week. They took a hit away from him like 3 days after it happened to end his on base streak. Which we'll talk more about MLB related stuff moving in a little bit. And to the people watching, feel free to drop some comments. We can interact with them as well. Throw them up on the screen. Just wanted to let you guys know that this will be more interactive than our typical podcast, obviously because it's live. So feel free to drop comments wherever you're watching, whether it be on Twitter or on Twitch. But anyway, back to the game today. They hit 4 home runs today. Reese McGuire hit the 4th one. They hit 3 in the span of 5 batters in the 3rd inning. Another kind of onslaught of power for a team that entered this year's with just 4 home runs the first 6 games or 7 games of the season. Reese McGuire, I think, is already like 1 off of his career high. We haven't even played a home game yet.
Yeah, his career high is 3.
Yeah, so this man is suddenly those wrist muscles and everything else is finally getting put to use on the baseball field. Dude's flexing some pop. But yeah, Tyler O'Neill hit his 5th home run. He's tied Mookie Betts. So for people who are still upset about the Mookie trade, the Red Sox have another right fielder flexing his muscles with a OPS of almost 1,400. Devers finally broke out of his slump and hit the ball out of the ballpark. And then, the first one was obviously David Hamilton. That's such a weird right field in Anaheim. Where there's like 8 feet of wall.
Yeah, there's a wall there, but if you hit it over the line, it's gone. Participation trophy shit everywhere.
I mean, I'll take it, and especially for David Hamilton, who had that miscue in the bottom
Yeah,
of the previous inning, and
I
before
would just
making
like
nice plays. But go ahead.
I would like to issue a public apology for me slandering David Hamilton in multiple group chats. Even if I know he's not going to keep up the pace he's at, but if he makes the plays, this team's going to be all right.
Oh, whoops, that was an accident. Yeah, I was
This
trying to
team
put. I
this
was
team
trying
will
to put
be
you.
all right.
I was trying to put you in the spotlight there, Tim, and I accidentally put myself there. My bad.
Yeah, no, this team will be all right. We just need a shortstop who can make the routine plays for now. Because last year we didn't have that until Story came back, so that's going to be a huge difference maker if he continues to make the routine plays. Does it suck he's a lefty bat? Yes, I get it. If you care about how much the lineup is balanced, I mean, I really don't give a fuck. Give me all the lefty bats in the world, but for those of you that care, I understand. But just let him make the routine plays.
Yeah, and I think we'll see
Jordan,
some. Just go ahead.
yeah, did you hear about? They said that Hamilton had a torn ligament in his hand last year. Did you hear about that?
Yeah, I was going to bring that up in a moment.
Yeah.
I think it was Ian Cundall tweeted it out. I'm going to pull it up as I talk. But yeah, he started the year pretty well, especially from a power standpoint. And yeah, I found the tweet, so I'll flash it on the screen real quick. But
Yep.
he started the year pretty well last season. I don't know how well that can be seen. First 216 plate appearances, he had an OPS of over 850 with 11 home runs, and then after it, it was hovering around 700. Batting average took a massive nosedive, as did his pop, obviously, as well. But I mean, playing with a torn hand ligament is insane. Like going through that, that's going to be a difficult thing to play through. It definitely explains the fact that there was absolutely no punch to anything he made contact with last year, especially in Boston. Um, I don't want to say that that's going to be the difference between him being like a really good major leaguer and not, and being like a 4A guy like he looked like he was last season. But I mean, we saw it in his first at bat today, and so far this season in AAA, he's got 2 home runs down in Worcester. He's going to probably be counted on a bit, especially because last night Pablo looked awful, and
Yeah.
I loved Pablo last season. I've made this analogy a few times that he was kind of like lipstick on a pig in the second half. Like he was one of the only guys in a lineup that looked like it had given up that actually still was performing at a moderately decent level. If Rob Refsnyder isn't hurt in spring training, I really don't know. I mean, I guess he probably would have made it over Bobby, but I mean, between Grissom and Rob Refsnyder, the 2 guys that probably don't make the roster are Bobby and then one of Valdez and Pablo Reyes. And the fact that he's going to be counted on to play a decent amount, maybe in a platoon sense with David Hamilton, they're going to need Vaughn Grissom back pretty soon, because I love Pablo. I think he's a great dude. I think he was a great story last season. Obviously, the team seems to love him, but this is a business and a results-based business, and I just don't think what he did last year is sustainable. So if they can get anything out of Hamilton and Grissom's back soon, that's they're in a much better position. And then obviously Cedon can play shortstop as well, but Pablo looked horrible last night. Him hitting second was just insane too. Like they had him and Dahlbeck
Yo,
hitting ahead of Casas.
yeah, Bobby ahead of Costas is just insanity.
It's so weird, man.
The Bobby Dahlbeck like experiment, I guess. I don't even know what to call it anymore. It's not an experiment anymore. But the Bobby Dahlbeck experience in Boston since like 2021 has been insanity. Like they're just sending him out there and expecting like a different result when you're not getting one.
Yeah, he's not a big leaguer. Like he tore the cover off the ball last year in Worcester, but then he also had like a 50 at bat stretch in Worcester last year where he was like 2 for 50. Like he just could not hit the baseball. He was awful for a long stretch of the season, hit 30 home runs. I mean, he did everything in his power to like get himself back to a big league opportunity, but I didn't think he did particularly well in spring training. And if CJ Crone was moderately ready for big league pitching, he probably would have made the team over Bobby. I'm shocked he's still here. I imagine that his time in Boston, he's not long for the major leagues.
Yeah.
I think Romy Gonzalez, if he continues to hit at the pace he's been so far to start the season, will be up here soon, especially if Story's out, because you need right-handed thump. Romy Gonzalez at least has some. Bobby doesn't make contact enough for his to ever matter. And that sucks for him because he's a good dude, but and he works his butt off, but he's just overmatched every time he's out there, and it's sad to see. And I almost feel for the guy because he doesn't deserve to be put through that.
Robert Vernon Dahlbeck, you are a Savannah banana / party animal.
Also, may or may not love toes. Not to kink shame, but may or may not love toes. He's BQ Swiss.
Come on, brother. Come on, brother.
My bad. That was out of pocket, but
that was out of stock.
That was out of stock. On the topic of toes. But anyway, last night was really, really bad for the Red Sox. It was nice that they were able to bounce back today, but last night, that play in the 7th inning that ended up costing them the game, even though they only scored 1 run. So it feels like air quotes are deserved for that statement. But chopper to third, Raffy starts in, then backs up. Pablo completely stops, like trying on the play, and it was just an all-around bad fundamental play that ended up costing the Red Sox 2 runs. That if Reyes peels off and goes to back up Devers, may only be 1 run, or if Devers charges it, it's still a 1-0 game. So that the presence of Trevor Story, or lack thereof, was definitely felt last night and the night before, where they almost blew it. Like the defense completely imploded once Story got sidelined. So, all right, thanks Tim for letting us know. But last night that play, it just was a microcosm of what happened in 2023 with the injuries and with injuries and poor defense that just completely screwed pitchers up. Brian, what went through your mind when you watched that play happen? Whether I don't know, it grinded my gears big time.
Well, you're watching the game and you're like, okay, 1-0 lead. Yeah, all right. Yeah, all right. It's gonna happen. It's gonna happen, and then it happens, and then it happens. It gets worse, and it gets worse. And it reminds me of I remember way back. They had teams that couldn't hit at all. I'm talking like Roger Clemens days, where it's like the team leader in home runs is like Ellis Burks. He's got like 13, and if you score 1 or 2 runs, that's probably all you're gonna get. You pray your pitching is good, but like you were saying, without Story at shortstop, it's a snowball effect. If Story's at short, he probably backs that up. But it was the stats last year, they were pretty clear. As soon as Story came back, all of a sudden Devers looked average or better than average. Before Story was there, Devers was having like a horrible year at third. And without Story there, today is different because everyone's hitting the cover off the ball. But in those 1-run games, defense is so important. And you saw what happens when you don't have your typical shortstop there, and then you have a below average third baseman, and it's just a snowball effect. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, and until that point, their defense was on point. I mean, they had a nice play, a couple nice plays up the middle last night, mostly by Valdez. Jaron Duran had a diving catch that a year ago Massa's definitely not making. Does not have the
Well,
range
yeah, they
or
said that,
speed
yeah.
or reaction time. Yeah, and then, but yeah, you get late in the game and things are starting to get close. You need your guys to be confident in their ability defensively, and I just don't think Devers is a confident individual defensively, especially when he's not hitting the ball, because he had been struggling. Thankfully for him, he was able to bust out with a home run today. But
Right.
and then you got Pablo at short, who kind of gets thrust into now needing to play more frequently, as opposed to being kind of a vibes guy like Brock Holt was for a handful of years. Yeah, it was just a nasty play. And they'd made 3 errors the night before after Story got hurt.
Yeah.
Rafaela dropped the pop fly in center, or more of a line drive. Valdez dropped a throw from Devers, which was not Valdez is 95% to blame for that play, but Devers made a horrible throw. He hits it, waist high or above. It's probably caught. It ended up being below his knee. It just became a mess. In a hurry, and they luckily were able to bounce back and win, because O'Hoppe hit that grand slam off Winkowski, and it just felt like it was going to be the worst loss of the season because they were up by 4, in the mid to late innings. But yeah, able to bounce back, take 2 of 3, go home 7-3 on the West Coast swing after like I said, in 2019 they went 3-8, and this is their
Right.
best start to a season since they started, I think, like 17-2 in 2018. I doubt they won't come close to that, but definitely an encouraging sign to go on the West Coast, hardest
Oh, yeah.
travel portion of the season, and come home with 7 wins.
In the wise words of Kenley Jansen, you never know.
You never know. And Kenley had a 1-2-3 inning for the first time this season, which was nice, even though he's throwing 88 miles an hour, which is alarming. But yeah, I mean, it's getting the job done so far. Before we go to more MLB stuff, I do want to talk about Kenley for a sec. I'll start with you, Tim, because you said you may be in the shadow realm soon with your phone. What do you think of Kenley and the fact that he's not throwing nearly as hard?
Dude, put him on the IL. Just let him sit. Shelf him for the year. Pay him his money and don't make him play ball.
Trade him at the deadline? Or are you just saying just keep
No,
him
60-day him and just let him sit at home, come to the ballpark when he wants. He's a good dude.
Jacoby Ellsbury him. Give him the Jacoby Ellsbury treatment. Just give him the check and tell him to stay home.
They could probably still get something for him at the deadline if they eat some of the money, but
Yeah, what are we getting, an FCL pitcher?
it's better than nothing. I mean, at this point, they're 7-3, so talking about selling off guys maybe is premature, but
Yeah, what's next? Let's trade Tyler O'Neill. Fuck you, asshole.
Yeah, while he's hot.
Well, he's red hot. His value will never be higher as a rental. I
Right.
mean, they got him for Nick Robertson and Victor Santos. So
Before the drug testing.
Before the piss test, get him out of here.
He's already headbutting windows in the parking lot.
Brian, what are your thoughts on Kenley so far?
Well, I mean, it's with all the other podcasts you listen to, and then listen to us, and just talking to my friends, it's all kind of like he's still butthurt from the off season, and I mean, but he is a professional, and I think somebody might have said, hey, listen, keep your mouth shut. If you want to get out of here, do your job, show you can perform, and that's the easiest way. If you just bitch and complain and you don't perform, you're not worth anything, and you're not going anywhere. And he understands that. His agent is probably like, listen, just do this, keep your mouth shut, get your shit together, and then hey, maybe worst case scenario, they're a wild card team. Okay, big deal, Or if they're awful, they're going to trade you. It's kind of too bad you got to eat money, but it kind of is what it is. But if he's not here and you use Martin as your closer, you're fine. If you use Slayton as your closer right now, I think you'd be okay. Their bullpen is nasty. It's just compared to I have faith. There's no Hanzo Robles anymore. There's no guys where you're like, oh shit, outside of the lefty who we don't want to talk about, but Bernardino will get up
He
here and I
must
think
not
we'll
be
fine.
named.
Exactly. I'm not talking about
Lord
him at all.
Voldemort.
But
Lord
Voldemort. Don't you feel like their bullpen though is just a lot better now? And they're getting 5 innings out of most of these guys, and you're okay. Today was huge though, Jordan, for me, because your number 5 starter with an off day tomorrow rests your entire bullpen. So opening day, you got all hands on deck, and you're going to need that for Baltimore.
Yeah, today was gigantic, and I agree that the bullpen definitely is a strong suit again this year. I mean, it was last year, but last year it was almost like you have to be leading after 6 to really have a chance, because even though their bullpen was better, it was really, Winkowski, Martin, and Jansen that kind of carried the back end of the bullpen. This year, I don't really, other than Lord Voldemort, I don't really feel down about anybody out there. I mean, Chase Anderson's only going to pitch, in days like today where they're up by a bunch and they're just, saving the bullpen, kind of in that pre-shoulder injury Corey Kluber role of just pitching garbage time. But he's got 2 saves this year. He's got 2 saves. He's tied with Edwin Diaz. So my hype video of Chase Anderson is going to good use because he and Edwin Diaz have 2 saves apiece. But yeah, I'm with you there though. Today was gigantic for Houck. That definitely is one of those games you have to mark down as you get towards like the end of April, early May. Or I mean, even in the middle of the season, you remember games like this because when guys like Weissert or Isaiah Campbell or even Kenley and Martin are still, going strong as they get closer to the All-Star break. You remember games like in April against the Angels and even that game against the A's that Houck pitched, him going 6 and being able to get the ball to Chase Anderson, who didn't completely crap himself. Like, I mean, if Anderson gives up 5 runs in the 7th, then you have to go to another reliever, him being able to get you 3 innings, 2 earned, as not pretty as the line looks, not having to go to another arm is gigantic. And you'll remember that, in July when those guys have to go. But to my initial question about Kenley, the velocity is alarming, but I think as long as he is able to still flash mid 90s, like I think last night he hit 93 on the cutter a couple of times. Or not last night, 2 nights ago. He hit 93 on the cutter a couple of times, which was, I think, huge. As long as people still have to think about it and respect the fact that he can throw it that hard, he can kind of surprise guys with 89, 90, 88 a couple of times the other night, as long as he's also spotting it. Like if he's erratic and throwing 88, he's not going to get any chases. But I think for the time being, as long as he can flash 95, 94, somewhere in that vicinity, he can get away with the less than ideal velocity. And maybe he's pacing himself because he didn't have a very good opportunity in spring training to get ready for the season. And maybe when we get into mid-May, he's throwing 94, 95 every cutter. But so far, it hasn't cost the Red Sox. It's cost a few years off my life watching a couple of his save opportunities. But, the Red Sox haven't lost a game he's pitched in. I'm pretty sure they're 4-0. Yeah, because he's 4 for 4 on save ops. So far, so good. Can't complain. But as y'all can see, we lost him. His phone died. So it's just going to be me and Brian. See you, Tim. It's just going to be me and Brian from here on out for the rest of the stream. We're going to move into some more MLB related stuff, and we're going to start with the injury bug that has bitten it feels like every single team. I mean, the Red Sox got it in spring training with Lucas Giolito, but the Marlins got it with Eori Perez, to a degree with Edward Cabrera. The Guardians just lost Shane Bieber for the year. I think has it been announced that Strider needs Tommy John as well?
I think so. I think it's still in the works, but everything I read says that it's the ligament, it's the problem that everyone has.
Yeah. So Strider's down. A lot of arm injuries. Garrett Cole doesn't need Tommy John, but he's still out until at least June with his elbow issue. So this has become sort of a hot button topic to talk about, whether it is chasing velocity and spin at the major league level. I mean, we'll talk about Dr. James Andrews' comment in a minute, but whether it's the pitch clock, whether it's just about chasing velocity and spin, maximizing stuff, especially out of starters, because we don't really see these types of injuries out of relievers. But I'm going to pull up what Dr. James Andrews said. If Brian, you want to give your initial thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, basically, his write-up was something that I believe it said something you don't physically mature until 26, which I thought was I didn't realize it was that late. But basically, what they're saying is these kids that are, high school or even younger, the AU kids, they're going to these camps and, variations of what the drive lane mentality of, the long toss and building up everything. And we're seeing all these freak injuries. And I think what you're going to pull up is he says that he was doing Tommy John surgeries on mostly Major League Baseball athletes maybe 10, 15 years ago. And now it's slowly progressing to it's mostly high school kids that are having the majority of these surgeries. And I think the big thing that people forget is that, oh, well, I had the Tommy John surgery. Now I'm throwing harder. Well, no, you're not throwing harder. You're throwing what you should throw because you were probably hurt before. And
Right.
what it is, it's kind of like, where I remember like John Lackey was like a classic example. It's like, oh, wow, he had the surgery. He's throwing great. Well, he's throwing what he did when he was in 2002 when the Angels won the World Series. And before he had the surgery, he was throwing, like 89, 90 or whatever. And, he had good control, so you can kind of get by. But just because you can throw harder, velocity isn't the be all end all of everything. It's kind of, there's a lot of these relievers, they can throw the ball 100 miles an hour. They get nowhere idea where it's going. It's the straight fastballs that, are the ones that are hit. I think now there's so much more movement on pitches. I think that is kind of big. And I've got a chance on Twitter to talk to. I'm sure you probably have too. You've probably seen some of it. Greg Olson, pitcher for the Orioles. He went to Auburn. His big thing was like, no curveball till high school. Like, yeah, that sounds like old fuddy-duddy old man to say that, but you're seeing firsthand all these injuries now that you never really saw before. And if you are a young kid and you can't get kids out with a fastball and a cutter and a changeup, you're probably not really going to be a really good pitcher if you're having to whip up curveballs when you're 12 years old. And gets overzealous coaches or AAU coaches that just want to win, you're just toasting a kid's arm. I work in high school sports now, and I mean, there's strict pitch counts at MIA right now, where even 6 years ago, I'd see a kid, in the Natick, Framingham, wherever, throw well over 100 pitches, and the coaches would just kind of shrug their shoulders like it was nothing. Now it's very, very strict. And I think that's a big part of it because they're seeing injuries like they've never seen before.
Yeah, I'm with you here, and this is what Dr. James Andrews said. I started following the injury patterns and injury rates in the year 2000. Back in those days, I did about 8 or 9 Tommy Johns per year in high school level and younger. And it's kind of completely, I'm now going to paraphrase because I don't want to read the whole thing, but it's kind of flip flopped. And now the big thing is it's coming down to the youth, coming down to the youth portion of the game. People are throwing 90 miles an hour in high school now, and it just can't withstand that kind of force. And as you said, Brian, from this, ligament matures around 26 years old. So a lot of people, and I mean, even guys that are on the Red Sox currently, guys like Garrett Whitlock and Nathan Eovaldi previously, were having Tommy John surgery in high school and in college. And that was, and with Eovaldi's case, that was in the mid to late 2000s. So he was kind of a rare breed at the time, but that's becoming more and more common. I do think at the major league level, because a lot of these guys are past the age of 26, some of them may have had some of this ligament damage already. But I do think it is a balance of stuff between maximizing velocity and spin and adding the sweeper, which is a much more, physically demanding pitch on your arm and on your elbow and shoulder. But the pitch clock definitely contributes to it. And I think it's sort of like working out, like when you're in the gym. If you're hitting your max, you're not going to only take like 30 seconds and then bang out another set. Like you're not going to take 2 minutes and bang out another set. You're going to take your time. You'll stretch. You'll collect yourself, and then you'll do another set. I mean, you probably aren't doing a million sets of your max anyway. I'm not a gym goer, as you can probably tell by looking at me. But
I thought you were.
but you're not hitting big on the weights unless you're Tyler O'Neill, with such consistency and with little recovery time. And a lot of that is trickling into the major leagues as well. Guys that throw 98, 99, 100 miles an hour now have to do it consecutively within a span of 18 or like 13 seconds with nobody on and 18 seconds with somebody on base. And that's down from last year when they had implemented it when it hadn't existed previously. So they already altered it. I do think there is a balance. I think it is largely due to the increase in throw as hard as you can, maximize your spin, let it rip. With the splitters, everyone's throwing a splitter now, everyone's throwing a cutter, everyone's throwing the sweeper, everyone's, trying to top out on their velocity. But I do think it's also they're not given ample recovery time. And that's kind of what we were talking about, I've talked about previously with kind of the pendulum swinging back with no shift restrictions to guys that hit for contact now. Guys like Duran have greatly benefited from it already. But that's going to bring back, that the finesse pitcher, the guy that dots cutters, throws 91, 92 miles an hour. Guys like, he's not doing so hot this year so far, but like Nestor Cortez in 2022, and I know he's battled some injuries as well, but a guy like him that maxes at like 94, 95, but he kind of sits around 91, 92, throws the cutter. He's more of a finesse guy in the modern day. Guys like him are going to benefit from it more. A guy like Kyle Hendricks was so great about 10 years ago, as a finesse pitcher. The guys like Glavine and Maddox and all these guys that people love to point to is like, oh, these guys would have never made it in today's game because they don't throw 100. Guys like that are going to find more longevity at the major league level, I think, now, especially with all the injuries that are mounting up for pitchers. And maybe those guys will start to kind of back off on throwing max effort every single pitch, especially a guy like Strider, because that dude just lets it eat every single pitch. And he's like full max effort every single time he winds up. But yeah, the injury bug is bad. It's really bad for baseball, especially all this ace level talent that is missing time whole seasons due to elbow injuries.
Well, I don't like it because it makes John Henry look like a genius. He's like, oh yeah, these over once you get over 30, you just break down, you can't pitch, and we shouldn't sign those guys. And then you get all these examples of guys you mentioned now who are like, we keep looking, okay, well, they didn't spend this year. Who are they going to get next off season? You're looking at their free agent class. You're like, all right, is Burns gonna sign a deal with the Orioles? Who's going to be available? And then it's like, okay, all these guys that are over 30, you're paying for what they did, not what they're going to do, because you figure they're going to be good for about 4 years and they're going to shit the bed probably at the end. And even the best players now, like how many surgeries has Ohtani had? Is this third one now?
I think it's second.
Okay,
Evaldi
Evaldi Valdi had 3 maybe or 2 at least.
2 or
right?
I think he's had 3 elbow surgeries, but only 2 were
Yeah.
Tommy John.
And then the Nationals finally settled with Strasburg. He had nerve damage. And I remember when he was at San Diego State, he was throwing over 100 on ESPN, like 102. And so I think Lou Merloni was talking about it, and he said basically that um, pitching mechanics, velocity, spin rate, we've reached the max the human can do right now. And now you're seeing what's happening, and the bodies are breaking down. You're having the freak injuries. You're having the, like in the 80s, we call them like the steroid injuries. It's like, why is that happening? It's because the muscles are so strong and the tendons just can't hold them in place. And like the spin rates are so much more than they were. The velocity is so high. I mean, to throw 90 in high school, that's crazy. But if you're throwing 90 in high school, what are you throwing in college? What are you throwing in the pros? And then your body just says, no, I'm not. Throwing a baseball has got to be the worst possible thing you can probably do for your arm in any sport. I mean, at least like, football, throwing a football, it's a little bit of a more of a natural motion. Bowling, you can pull the underhand. Softball, you can pitch all day. But the overhand with the rotator cuff and your elbow, it is the worst possible thing you can do. And it's just a matter of time before the weakest point breaks down. And that's why that elbow is always the first thing to go.
Yeah, and a lot of guys you see over the years, especially recently, it's like it's a domino effect for them specifically. I mean, we saw it with Chris Sale for the last handful of years. I know he had some other injuries mixed in, like the falling off the bike, breaking his wrist, taking a line drive off of his hand, the stress fracture in his ribs. But for years, it was shoulder and elbow related, and that was the thing
Right.
that was talked about when the Red Sox acquired him back in 2017. His mechanics are a ticking time bomb. You cannot throw
Mhm.
100 miles an hour from that arm slot and not get hurt. And they ended up extending him, and the injury bug caught up to him. So a guy like him, specifically with that funky delivery, which is, I mean, he threw smoke, so that's obviously part of why he was so hard to hit. But the deception in his delivery made him so much more difficult to hit, and that was probably a big reason why he ended up hurting himself. That and the absurd pitch count that he would always seem to be logging, especially in 2017 when they were trying to chase 300 strikeouts with him. Um, but yeah, I mean, these guys are getting hurt all the time. It's bad for the game. They need to find a way to not necessarily baby them to the point where like they're so overprotected, kind of like wide receivers and quarterbacks in the NFL. Like you can't touch them at all. But like find a happy balance between having such unbelievable stuff and completely fucking yourself, Like you don't want to be horrible, but can you take a little bit off of your fastball and still be effective? Like, I mean, DeGrom is another guy that has had injury after injury after injury, and he was the best pitcher on the planet for 4 or 5 years, and that's horrible for the game. Nobody even talks about that because it's not new, and all these other top flight guys are getting hurt. Um, and like I feel like a lot of people may have forgotten how good that guy is, but how will he be, 4 years removed from his last fully healthy season? Um,
What it is, Jordan, it's a direct correlation with strikeouts. If you look at when strikeouts went up, that's when injuries went up. Because like
I
back in the
believe it.
day, you'd have a guy like a Warren Spahn or whoever. These guys would throw multiple innings. Nolan Ryan, perfect mechanics. He was a strikeout pitcher, but he was a whiteout. He was an elephant. Most guys to throw 200 strikeouts was a really big deal. But you pitched to contact. You didn't have to worry about shifts as much, even though they weren't banned yet. But now without the shift, you're going to see some things change. But if you pitch to contact, guess what? Your pitch counts down. And then maybe you can get to the 5th or 6th inning. When you try and strike every guy out, you foul pitches off. And look like having Whitlock. You were talking about tipping pitches earlier. Um, if you have 100 pitches by the 5th inning, Major League Baseball 2024, you're out of the game. They're not going to leave you in. How many times have we seen guys pitch a no-hitter and they'll pull them out now?
Yeah.
You would have never seen that even maybe like 5 or 6 years ago. Now it's like, well, it's early in the season. It's April. We know the guy hasn't given up a hit, but he's throwing 100 pitches by the 6th inning, so they pull him out. You would never, ever see that. Not even like in an amateur game. You just wouldn't see it. But it's when you go for strikeouts. I know like Billy used to say strikeouts are like fascists, It's like, oh, it's all about me, strikeouts. Get your team involved. You throw 27 sliders, you get 27 ground ball outs, and you're out of there in an hour and a half, and you're drinking a beer and you're playing golf. Like that's what baseball should be. It shouldn't be like I'm going to strike everybody out. The games are 4.5 hours long. Like the Red Sox Yankees games were back like in 2004. They just go on forever. You want to keep everybody involved. You want to keep it exciting. The strikeout, it's the modern day. It's the walk, the strikeout, or the home run, and that's when you lose fans when you do that.
Yeah, and I love strikeouts as much as the next guy. Like it's frustrating to watch when it's your team striking out all the time, like the Red Sox have been this season. I think they had
Lately,
14
yeah,
last night.
absolutely.
They had 14 last night, but yeah, I mean, I love strikeouts. I think where it's really important though is when you have your relievers in the game, those guys' ability to miss bats, so that way you don't have to let your defense get involved in close games, in close situations, so they avoid plays like what happened in the 7th last night for the Red Sox. But yeah, for starters, I mean, your job is to go deep in the game, and at least get your team 5, and that's like the big thing that Cora is hammering home, this season, is to at least get them 5. And yeah, this is a tremendous point from Dean here. Guys going for max velocity on every pitch is why guys can't go much longer than 100 pitches.
Absolutely right.
That's
absolutely,
absolutely true. On top of that, the guys that are throwing, 60 sweepers a game, or I'm exaggerating, but like Whitlock threw, I think 30 something last night. And the sweeper is definitely a nasty pitch, and a lot of guys have trouble hitting it. But at what cost if guys are fouling it off? You don't have a feel for it, but you continue to throw it over and over and over again. Those in-game adjustments that a lot of the old in-game pitchers, like now everything is so by the book, and I think a lot of the modern game gets too much hate, and maybe I'm hating on it a little bit too much myself right now. But those in-game adjustments of like the catchers being so in tune. Like I interviewed Jason Kendall a few years back, and he talked about how so much of the mind games that the catchers would play on hitters. You see how their feet are moving on certain pitches and certain counts, how they're cheating, where their hands are, stuff like that. Those things are kind of completely thrown out now. I'm sure there's some degree of it still involved, but it's nowhere near as advanced because everything is so by the book. And a guy like Whitlock last night, I felt like he just wasn't getting any whiffs, but he kept throwing the same pitches. Like if you're not getting whiffs, then maybe you should start trying to pitch to get, quick outs. And I thought he did that great in the Seattle game in his first start. I know he ended up with 8 Ks, but he was getting very deep into counts those first 3 innings. And then the last 2 innings, he only threw like 18 pitches to get 6 outs. And him getting through 5 was gigantic, especially after an extra inning game the night before. And then last night, he just it was sweeper after sweeper after sweeper after sweeper, and everything was getting fouled off. And maybe if he was content with pitching to contact and getting guys out quicker, he could have gone 5 or 6 innings, and you wouldn't have had to depend on Houck, who historically is not good at doing that, to do it again. And thankfully he did, so it's kind of moot. But my point stands on that. But so we'll go back a little bit more into Major League Baseball as a whole. I don't know how much you've watched of other teams this season, Brian, but is there anything?
Quite a bit, yeah.
Yeah, I've been able to be quote unquote working hard but hardly working because I had 2 monitors at my job, so I've been able to split screen.
Yeah.
So I've gotten some eyes on some things. What are some things that have surprised you so far in the early stages of the season? I've got one specific that actually I just noticed now looking at the standings real quick.
I mean, it's way too early, but I'm like, what the hell was going on in Detroit those first couple series? It was like, oh my god, like the year it was 0-0-0, and then Houston was shit in the bed, but the Yankees were hot. And then the other thing, I think I sent you a link to some Major League Baseball points, but one of them was like batting average ball and play by lefties is like double what it's been over the past like 10 years. And they said it's mostly because of shifts. And so if you're a left-handed hitter right now, if you hit the ball on the ground, your batting average is because you don't have that second baseman playing on the foul line in right field anymore. I mean, Ortiz must be watching these games being like, I would have hit 400 like if they didn't do this, because I can't tell you how many games I was at. He would scorch a ball to right field on the line, and they just throw the ball to first base over and over and over again.
Yeah, it's definitely nice, and it adds a little bit more action. And like I said earlier, the pendulum's kind of swinging back towards those contact guys, the Luis Arises of the world, and Aaron Duran from a Red Sox standpoint. For me, the big thing that has caught my attention, like we all knew that the Rockies were going to suck. We all knew that the White Sox would suck, the A's would suck, but the A's aren't even in last place in their division because the Astros are 2-7.
Yeah.
That's
I don't know
crazy.
if they just, yeah. Are they just like, what's, Is it just it starts with their pitching, but I don't know if some of their hitters just aren't. Basically, it's their time. I mean, Altuve is always leads the team, and then they have their outfit hitter was it Preston, was it Wilson? I always get his name confused. I mean, he's always just a beast. But Bregman is not a big deal anymore. There's always talk like, oh, he's not the hitter he was. I don't know if their shelf life has kind of just run out. I mean, I don't know what you think, but
Well, their rotation ERA, I'm checking it right now, is fourth in baseball. So their starting pitching has been awesome.
okay, it's been
Their
okay.
their bullpen ERA is 7.31. They are 29th in the majors in ERA out of their
Well, that'll
bullpen,
do it.
and it's still early. But they had leads against the Yankees in I think 3 of those 4 games, and they blew
Yeah.
all of them. So
Yep.
like that's a major issue. And I know like they still have some good dudes out there. Like they have Graveman, who's not the same, but he's still solid. Same with Ryan Presley. But they lost Phil Maton in the offseason to the Rays. I thought that was an underrated subtraction. He's been very good for
Mhm.
them over the last few years. It was very telling for me on opening day when Framber Valdez struggles to get through 5 because he's walked like 6 dudes, and they bring in their first guy. I think it's Seth Martinez. His ERA last year was 5.7, and I know reliever ERA can be misleading.
Mhm.
But the dude also was a walks machine last season. Like that's their first guy out of the bullpen with the bases loaded in a close game. That's the first guy they go to. Their fire drill righty is a dude who had an ERA of almost 6 and walks the ballpark. For me, the Astros being 2-7 is insane. Like they look horrible, and they'll probably be fine. Like we'll be looking at the divisions in May, and
Right.
they'll be like 33-17, but like because they just find a way to win. They're kind of like the more talented, more expensive version of the Rays, in the
Right.
sense that they don't look very good on paper, but they still bang. Like they'll still find ways to win. I mean, they still got Jordan. Altuve's still good. Bregman is not the same, but he's still good.
Well,
Um,
it
but
just
yeah,
shows you how good the bullpen is with the Red Sox, how different it is from a couple years ago. And I mean,
yeah,
where would the Sox be right now without Campbell and all these different guys they have? It'd just be like we talk about, oh well, the games they lost were only by 1 run or whatever, but I mean they had some guys come in and my dad or friends of mine are like, who the fuck is this guy? I mean, this is like, where did we get this guy from? He's amazing. And I mean, Jordan, you remember I brought his name before. Remember Hansa Robles coming in,
yeah.
or all these different guys, and it was like, oh man, like if they didn't have a 3-run lead after like the seventh inning, they were going to lose. They were just going to lose the game. And now
Yeah,
like
that's
I'm going to be there. Yeah, I'm going to be there on Wednesday, and I'm like, I know that if they have a lead after the seventh inning, they're probably going to win now.
yeah. I mean, like for example, like with I just gave the Astros bullpen ERA, the Red Sox bullpen ERA, and this is counting Joely Rodriguez, by the way. I know I just said his name, so I'm probably gonna get struck down by God in a few
That
moments,
happened.
but 1.45 ERA for the Red Sox bullpen, and that's including Joely Rodriguez, as I just mentioned. They've pitched 37 in the third innings, which is probably more than they would like. I mean, 6 of them are by Chase Anderson, so I mean it is what it is there. They are. Let me just pull it up real quick. They're towards the middle of the pack in innings, which is great because last year they were towards the top, which speaks volumes to the starting pitchers giving a little bit of length. I know only Hauk has given them 6 innings multiple times. He was the only one that kind of looked about as good the second trip through as the first. Um, but yeah, the bullpen has been a massive strength for them, and that's again including he who must not be named that I just named twice. Um, a couple more things that I found shocking so far. I mean, you already mentioned the Tigers. They started 5-0. They're now 6-3 and second in the AL Central. The Guardians are 7-2.
Mhm.
Um, I don't remember if I mentioned it, but Shane Bieber also needed elbow surgery, so he's done for the
Yep.
season, which is
Yep.
awful for the game because he looked amazing against the A's. But everyone was talking about how his stuff was starting to tick back up, and he's immediately hurt, and he felt pain after the season opener, and then pitched his second time out, and it just obviously the rest is what it is. But he was throwing 93 miles an hour in January. That's another thing is these guys are working out a lot sooner in the offseason. I know I just kind of went backtrack to what we were talking about before. These
That's
guys are
fine.
working out a lot earlier in the offseason and getting stretched out and throwing, top velocity and at like 9 like again, Bieber barely hit 93 last year in July. I mean, whenever I know he missed some time last year with injury. We'll say June because I think he might have gotten hurt in July. but he was barely throwing 93 miles an hour in the beginning of the summertime last year, and he was throwing 93 in January this past season. So, I mean, it speaks volumes to kind of where the game is at nowadays. But what I was saying before, another thing that has shocked me so far this season, the Mets are 3-6. I didn't think they were going to be great, but they were. They started 0-6. The Marlins made the playoffs last year. They're 1-9. They finally broke.
Yeah.
They finally won. So maybe that'll start something. But like a lot of
How
people,
how bad do things have to be in Miami before they have a fire sale? You think they're just gonna? I think they're gonna cash in all those chips because they got nothing. That's a tough team right now.
yeah, I don't know how bad it's going to have to get. I mean, I'm sure that they will sell before we get to the nitty gritty portion, like before the deadline.
Yeah.
I don't even know necessarily like who from that team. I mean, they're 1-9 for a reason. Like they're all playing like garbage. Um, like who from that team would people really? I mean, Jazz Chisholm is an option.
Second baseman
But
there, he's great there. That's a guy I would take
yeah,
there. Yeah.
yeah. They got. I mean, Jake Berger. They just traded for last year. Josh Bell's a switch hitting first baseman, so that's a guy that's an option for. I mean, this is just for teams in general.
Uh-huh.
But like there's a
Luzardo.
reason they're 1-9. Yeah, Luzardo, their starting pitching is still really solid on paper, even though I don't
Is
think it's been
Alcantara out
particularly.
for the year? Do you know? Is he out for the
I
year?
believe so. I believe so. I think
Okay,
he got
so but I
surgery
mean, you could
in
still grab
August.
him technically, I guess. I don't know. I mean, because I know they owe him a bunch of money. Didn't they sign him to like a big contract or
Yeah, there's
big
like
for them?
5 years. 5 years, like 85 mil. He's the
Yeah,
guy
I
like
wouldn't mind him.
kind of buying into the philosophy of Andrew Bailey so early into the season of hate. If you throw a four seam, I hate you. As a starter. So Sandy Alcantara has a four seam, but he's a sinker first guy, and he doesn't necessarily rely on whiffs, and he's a guy that gives you innings. And if the
Big
Red Sox
innings.
were to trade for a guy, thinking in the mindset of this is still a bridge year, whether they're good or not, if they make the playoffs, they make the playoffs. But I think this will be a year they finally are creative at the deadline and not in the sense that they trade Christian Vasquez and bring in like Tommy Pham. I think it'll be like, oh, they trade Tyler O'Neill or they trade, Kenley but like Liam Hendricks will be back around that time, which is crazy to think this bullpen that's as good as it is will be getting back an all-star in July or August. But, they trade like Tyler O'Neill or they trade, Nick Pivetta, but they bring in Sandy Alcantara, who may not be a part of the team this year, but next year and years after
Mhm.
that will be, a frontline starter for them or number 2 or number 3 starter on a pretty reasonable contract, even more
Yeah.
so than like Jesus Luzardo, who obviously is a better player, but you'll have to give up the Myers and the Teals and the
Mhm.
Roman Anthony's of the world, and the Red Sox are just not going to do that. If they were going to do that, they would have probably done it for like Cease or Luzardo in before the season started. That team's
Not to get off
garbage
topic,
though.
Jordan. We got a quick question for you. What do you think of that guy for the Athletics who was throwing like 102 and nobody could touch him? Did you see that guy pitch? He was like their
Oh yeah,
closer or
Mason
the
Miller.
center man. Where did he come from? Holy
Let me let
shit.
me
I
let
mean,
me pull
man.
up where he's from, but that guy is nasty. Yeah, he threw
Yeah,
like
grab him in a
30.
second. Get him on
He
your team like tomorrow. Holy shit.
Yeah, he threw 39 pitches. I think 11 of them generated whiffs, or 29 pitches, 11 of them
Yeah.
generated whiffs. He was
Yeah.
a third round pick by the A's in 2021. He's 25 years old. So far this season, yeah, they haven't played today. 5 innings pitched. His ERA is 3.60. I don't know how anybody ever made contact against that guy.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Average fastball of 101 miles an hour. So that dude can let it eat. He'll be an
What does he
Atlanta
make?
Brave in the next couple of years.
$200,000 maybe, 300,000 a year. I mean, he probably makes dog shit money.
Yeah, he's on pre-arbitration, so I think it's like
Yeah.
720K, whatever the league minimum is. But yeah, he'll be an Atlanta Brave before 2026 is up. I've
But
never been more
wow.
confident that there's a guy who will. I've never been more confident in an Atlanta Brave, like a future Atlanta Brave, than I am with Mason Miller. Like that seems to be like they're like a triple A team for the Braves. They've already given them
Okay.
Sean Murphy, they've already given them
Yeah.
Matt Olson. So here
Yeah.
comes Mason Miller, this dude that probably will replace Spencer Strider in 2 years.
Yeah.
And they'll just never miss a beat because Alex Anthopoulos is a mastermind negotiator.
Exactly.
AA Island is real, and it doesn't necessarily just stem from free agency. He does it in trades as well.
I hear you. But yeah,
Although
he was
although
something special.
He was awesome. I cannot believe they ended up winning that game. I thought for sure. I mean, it's the A's, so maybe I gave them too much credit, thinking that they'd be able to score a guy from second or a guy from third with one out. In what was it, like the 11th inning of that game?
Yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah, that dude's a freak. They are going to find a way to waste him and then trade him to a really good team, and I think it'll be Atlanta before too long. So good news for him. He just has to suffer for 2 more years on a crappy team. He'll get to play in a minor league-esque stadium next year, and then he'll get to go play at
Sacramento,
Truist
right?
Park.
Yeah.
Yeah, he'll get to go play it. We could talk about that. We haven't even talked about the A's situation, but he'll go play at Truist Park in 2026, and he'll be happy. He'll win a World Series there.
Have you seen the internal memos, Jordan, that they give to the staff at the Athletics games? Where it's
Yeah,
something like don't open gate B if there's not amount of fans, and make sure you push like this like item at the event, and basically they know that like there's not going to have a lot of people, and then people are going to be bullshit and be upset, and they're basically trying to like, well, do the best you can, take care of the people. We know they're all going to be miserable. Like they're getting like directives from like the staff. It's kind of funny.
Yeah, I did see that.
Yeah.
That they're such an embarrassment. Like, I feel horrible for the Oakland A's fans out there. And I know people like to joke like, "Oh, there's A's fans." Yes, there are a lot of Oakland A's fans. That ballpark fills out. I mean, it's a football stadium basically.
Yep.
There's way too many seats for that market, but that is a passionate fan base. That is a group of people who are pissed off. They're not going to games because there's no market. Look at what the owner puts out on the field. Like, I think Brent Rooker's gonna, be fine this year. Ryan Noda, same deal. I think Zach Geloff is a really good player, but like, are people really, lining up to watch Darnell Hernandez play shortstop or JD Davis or fucking? I mean, JJ Bleday looks like he may have figured something out, but like, their only exciting player entering that series with Boston was Esteury Ruiz, and they optioned him before the game or before the series started. They are not serious about putting up an exciting product. Nobody wants to go to games because of that, and their owner sucks. They need to sell the team. I really don't think that it's a market issue. They eventually want to move to Vegas, and there's nothing you can do to stop them there. But it's that's a passionate market. That is a blow for baseball that they're not going to be there starting after this season.
Do you think it's the kind of thing once they get to Vegas, they'll be able to print money though, and then they can go spend all kinds of money, or they still won't just because of that's the way ownership is?
I have no idea. Like, I seriously don't know. I honestly wonder. I'm sure that memo from a middle manager who was in charge of staff training. Yeah, probably. Wouldn't be shocked, but I have no idea what the market is going to look like for the Oakland A's. What I feel like could end up happening is, and we haven't heard any rumblings of this. This is purely speculation on my part. They've wanted to sell. Nobody wants to take over that team, that ballpark. That a lot of players speak actually very highly of, even though there's a mile of foul territory on both sides.
Pitchers loved it. Pitchers loved it. Their
Yeah.
ERA was a lot lower. I mean, Rich Hill went there. He's like, if somebody fouls the ball off, I get like 3 or 4 extra outs a game because of that. Yeah.
Garrett Whitlock definitely wishes he pitched in Oakland instead of Anaheim,
Mhm.
with all those foul balls that were hit off of him. But this is my theory that I actually just came up with on the spot right now. I'm stalling it because I'm trying to formulate it as I'm talking. But
Okay.
my theory is they've wanted to sell the team before, them being Fisher, the owner of the team. Hasn't gotten anybody to bite because nobody really is enthusiastic about taking over the team in Oakland, or at least at that ballpark.
Mhm.
And
Yep.
they're buying time. They're going to go to Vegas. They're going to have that first year there. And I believe 2028 is their first year in Vegas. And then
Mhm.
they'll sell after that season. And then that's when I think they'll start spending, or at least spending more. I don't know if they'll be going after like Juan Soto tier players, but
Right.
would they be in the market to sign a guy like, I don't know. I'm just thinking of the guys that signed this offseason. Would they be in the market to sign a guy like Shota Imanaga in free agency? Would they be willing to sign a guy like Lucas Giolito to a fairly hefty deal? I think that day is coming with next ownership, and I don't think that is coming in. I don't think the new ownership's coming until they're in Vegas.
Right. Yeah, I don't see them doing anything until then, and then after that, I think you're going to have a guy like a Cohen or somebody come in who has a lot of few money and is going to like, okay, I'm doing it this way. I'm going to do my, and it'll probably blow up in their face. You get a bunch of 38-year-old, pitchers who used to be the shit, and all of a sudden the whole team gets hurt, and then fire sale again like the Mets did. So, oh well, that's their problem, not mine.
Yeah, it definitely puts into perspective as it definitely puts into perspective that as bad as Red Sox ownership is or has been recently, it could always be worse. And I remember I got reamed for saying something similar to this in the off season about the rotation because I saw the Rockies rotation and I said, well, it could always be worse, Red Sox fans. I got reamed for that, but it's similar. Like people want to compare Red Sox ownership to these small market teams. They're like, oh, they're a small market organization. And I'm sure I contributed to that kind of philosophy or that line of thinking in the offseason just out of pure emotion and hatred for the fact that they said they were going full throttle and signed Cooper Criswell and Lucas Giolito. But they're at worst they're a mid-market run organization now. Like they still have a payroll of over 200 million. Like let's be a little bit more empathetic to these teams that are these fan bases that actually have small market owners like the A's and the Rays. I mean, maybe not necessarily the Rays because they're in the division, but like at least Oakland, like they're harmless. That fan base just wants to have a team that they can be proud of going to see, and that ownership group will not invest in them. They'll cut payroll again. I think like Brent Rooker will be an arbitration player next season, which means he probably is either traded at the deadline or traded in the offseason or non-tendered altogether because they're so unserious about spending money.
Yeah, it's really sad because, when I was a kid, the A's were the best team in baseball. It was, they with McGuire and Canseco, everybody in the Boston area, had Oakland Athletic gear on because it was the cool thing. Ricky Henderson was there, Dave Stewart was there, and the Red Sox were like, oh yeah, they made the playoffs, and they used to spank the Red Sox in the playoffs every year, 88, 90, and all these other years. So, it's kind of crazy to see what happened to them because they basically, you're right, they're like almost like they're not even relevant anymore.
Yeah, I mean, like we saw, like and they have these little runs of success too, where it makes it extra frustrating that they don't invest. Like, I mean, you look at the core they had, in like 2018, 2019, they had Matt Olson just came up. They had Sean Murphy. They had Matt Chapman. They had three all-star caliber players, three top 10 guys at their position. And Murphy and Olson's case, they're top 5 at their position. They had good players. They traded Jesus Luzardo, who's now a top 20 starting pitcher or about that, for Starling Marte, who at the time was probably a top 15 outfielder, but they had no intention of bringing him back. So they'd given up on Luzardo prematurely for a guy that they only kept for like 17 games because it was the COVID year. They're such a bizarre team. Like they go for it when they are in a contention window, but they never do it from a financial standpoint. I mean, like we're at the point in their life as a organization with their ownership group that it makes them signing Yoenis Cespedes out of Cuba, like, or no, he wasn't Cuba, was he? Why am I blanking? He was Cuba, yeah. Yeah, he was defected from Cuba. That makes, like, how did they end up with him? How did they get him? Like, they won a bidding war for Yoenis Cespedes, and, like, he was a great player, but, like, it feels like thousands of years ago that they made that kind of investment in the team, and it was, what, like 2011, 2012? Like they're so unserious about spending money now. Like everyone's payroll is going up because the luxury tax is going up, and they're like back in 2002 with their $38 million payroll.
Yeah, I mean, I think though they had the Royals way of doing things where they were so bad for so long, kind of like how the Astros basically tanked. So you get like the first pick in all these drafts, and your draft has to be perfect. And if you position it correctly with arbitration, you can kind of keep that going. But as soon as you take a couple bad guys and make a few bad moves, it's not just like, oh, you go from a 90-win team to an 80-win team. You go from a 95-win team to a 75-win team or a 68-win team. And then before you know it, you're screwed again, and you got to wait 3 or 4 years. And as you know, just because you draft a guy, in college, like whoever it is in the College World Series, they might not pan out. And I think that like Billy Beane, his thing was, I'm not going to draft high school players because it takes so long to develop. I want to win right away. I'm only going to draft college players. So then people try to draft college players, but then they realize that those guys' arms were toast because now all the college players, their arms have so many more miles on them than the high school players. Like there's no rhyme or reason to it. And if you think you know what you're doing when it comes to scouting, you don't. I think the best scouts in baseball hit on like 2% maybe. I mean, it's such a crapshoot. So.
Yeah, I mean, it speaks a lot to player development. So, like, when you think of these
Huge.
teams like Atlanta and LA that are constantly, um, holy crap, he might do it again. Sorry, not to pull it, to completely lose it for a second, but there's something very interesting going on in the Rangers Astros game with a certain Ronel Blanco again. I will leave it at that. As we are into the, he will take it at least into the bottom of the sixth inning.
Wow.
But
Okay.
anyway, yeah, the 30-year-old rookie. Anyway, but yeah, like I was saying, you look at teams like the Rays and the Astros now, and the
Mhm.
Dodgers and the Braves, and it feels like everyone they bring up is great. But in reality, those guys are like 4 players out of 95, 100 guys in the organization. Like
Mhm.
that is a very small hit rate. So, like you said, like the best starters or the best scouts in the game, their success rate's not very high. Like it's not. Um, they just the development staff is very good at getting the most out of the guys that do end up panning out. And it makes teams like the A's, who even still, I think their development staff is fine. Like it's not not the Braves or the Astros level, but like a guy like Zach Geloff is a good player. Like that's a guy that they hit on. I know he's struggling this season, but that's a guy they hit on. Um, their development staff did well on. He's succeeded at the major league level, at least what did last year. Mason Miller looks like another guy. I know he's a
Yeah.
reliever at the moment. Maybe they stretch him out as a starter. Who knows? But like, there's two, and like, so that's not very different. It's just how well they impact the game and the work you do, on the margins of the roster, and then the guys you bring in externally. Like you look at the Red Sox right now, like Bayo has not looked great, but he's a guy that they developed. Hauk, same deal. Like Whitlock, they got externally, but I would still probably credit them for his development as well because he
Mhm.
was a Rule 5 guy when they brought him in. Same with Slayton. But you look at Kenley Jansen, external pickup. Tyler O'Neill, external pickup. I forgot to mention Devers. Obviously, he's the big one that they hit on. But
Mhm.
Kenley, Chris Martin. They were going to do it with Giolito. They brought in Masa Yoshida. They brought in Trevor Story. I know some of these guys haven't panned out, but these are guys that they brought in and they invested to supplement or complement the young guys that they brought in. And by the way, I jinxed it. Ronel Blanco just gave up a hit with 2 outs in the sixth. But the dude had 14,
Moving
14 and
on.
2/3 hitless innings to start his 2024. So that's pretty good for him.
That's
But
awesome.
yeah, he's making a name for himself. They were in the running for 2 of their 3 wins to start the year, being Ronel Blanco no hitters, who I did not know existed until he threw the first one.
There you
Um,
go.
but yeah, the success rate on these scouts, like you said, not exceptionally high. It's what you do around the guys that you do hit on
Mhm.
that makes the difference. I mean, in 2018, like JD Martinez, Chris Sale, David Price, Craig Kimbrell, Steve Pierce. That's like 5 of your most important players that or 5 of the most important players on your roster that complemented Mookie Betts, who you brought in and developed. And he's an extreme example because he's one of the best players ever, really, at this point. Benintendi, Bogarts, and Devers, who wasn't really much of anything that season, but like they complemented those guys very well. And a team like the A's will never get over the hump if they're only developing guys and then bringing in guys like Alex Wood, who I think he's a good pitcher, but like he's not gonna win the Cy Young or vie for it. He'll be a decent pitcher that they trade in July.
A lot of it's luck and health too. I remember going to Portland to see Benintendi and Makata play, and I'm like, you can't get rid of Makata. Move Benintendi. Makata was just like, oh my god, 40 million. His signing bonus was like 40, $50 million. It was
Yeah.
like he's the first guy to get a passport from Cuba, like in the history of planet Earth, like to actually leave the country legally. Like it was just like something's up with that guy. Like it just you can't get rid of that guy. He was the guy to move in. Kopech. It's like the guy threw 100. Like you can't get rid of him. He's going to be amazing. He never did anything. And then
Yeah.
it's all the moves you don't make, and then just bringing guys in. And then, the biggest trade I always thought was the Veritek Derek Lowe trade for Heathcliff Slocum. I mean, you just stole from Seattle. You don't get those guys. A lot of that other stuff doesn't happen. And we're probably not even doing this podcast because the whole perception of Red Sox baseball is different if that trade isn't made.
Oh, for sure. And then it doesn't always necessarily benefit the Red Sox. I mean, they traded Jeff Bagwell. I'm trying to pull up how many games the guy that traded for him was. For Larry Anderson, I think it was like
Larry
18.
Anderson, yeah. Yep.
Larry Anderson, 15 games, and granted, he had a 1.23 ERA in 1990, but they traded Jeff Bagwell for a 37-year-old reliever, and Jeff Bagwell only became one of the best first basemen of all time and is in the Hall of Fame. So who knows how differently, the course of Red Sox history goes if they have Bagwell in the 90s. They had Mo Vaughn, so they could have moved one to DH and not had Brian Daubach in the mid to late 90s. There was definitely ways they could have made that work, but it doesn't always benefit you, but it just goes to show how random baseball is. Like you said, Moncada was the guy you could not trade under any circumstance, and how close they were to trading Benintendi, because it was literally Dombrowski said, pick which one you wanted and we'll give you him. And they picked Moncada. I would have too, because he just looked like the much more intriguing prospect. He was the number one prospect in baseball at the time. But if they had chosen Benintendi, do they end up trading Devers or even Moncada again for Stanton? Because that was a big thing that offseason as well, or the following offseason. Stanton got dealt for Starlin Castro and some other crap. Some other crap from the Yankees because Derek Jeter wanted to throw a bone to his guys. But would they have traded Moncada or Devers or even Bogarts for Stanton? It just goes to show the White Sox view on Benintendi, if they were higher on him, which is crazy because they ended up signing Benintendi and now both of them are teammates again, which is funny. Yeah. But yeah, the whole complexion of Red Sox history changes with that one move, and maybe Moncada pans out in Boston like he didn't in Chicago, but maybe he does. It's just, baseball's weird.
That's right.
Any last takeaways from this week of Major League Baseball? I don't really have much of anything left to add. I haven't done my power ranking updates. I wanted to have more than a 4-game sample to do them on, and I was hoping to have them ready for the show tonight, but forgot the Red Sox played at 4 and not 1 o'clock because they're on the West Coast. I was going to do them after the Sox game.
The only thing I have, Jordan, is Teoscar Hernandez. I think he leads Major League Baseball in RBIs or something crazy, or he's right up there. And then of course Mookie Betts is Mookie Betts, and I'm that's a little crazy. It'd be nice to have players like that on this team, but there's not a lot you can do.
Yeah, Teoscar Hernandez.
RBIs. Yeah.
Teoscar's been great. Yeah.
So I remember the week that he was coming here. It was a week. Oh yeah, he's definitely coming to the Red Sox, and then that panned out.
There was 3 players this winter that I was it feels like a when and not if that they will be Red Sox. Monty was one, Teoscar was another, and then Lourdes Gurriel Jr. was another, and they ended up getting none of them because baseball and the Red Sox are unserious about free agency. But I can't complain too much. They're 7-3. As I said at the beginning of the show, 7-3 last year, or the last time they went west to start, they came back 3-8. So definitely something to be happy about. Big test. I think the first real test of this, the test in duration of the West Coast trip is a test, but the first real test from an opponent standpoint is the Baltimore Orioles. We won't really go too much into a preview of it because, I don't know. The Orioles, all I'll say is the Orioles are changing their rotation for that series. So the home opener will not be Brian Bayo versus Cole Irvin. Irvin is going Wednesday. Burns is starting the opener. So it could be a very, very good pitching matchup for you on opening day if Bayo remembers that he doesn't like giving up home runs and likes getting ground balls. That would be awesome. He hasn't really looked like that so far. But that could be a very good pitching matchup on opening day. I will be there in attendance, down in the right field boxes. Come say hi if you want to. I know I'm not shit, but if you want to come say hi, I'll be over there. I'll be meeting with a few other people from Red Sox Twitter. You said you're going Wednesday?
Yeah, I'll be there Wednesday night. And I'll be my first game of the year. I got 19 other games to go to. Nice. If it gets to that point, there's a couple seats near me with season ticket holders that hardly ever show up. So if you want a really good seat for next to nothing, I can squiggle you in the ballpark. Just get back to me and I'll figure out something for you.
Oh, word.
Yeah, I know exactly. I can tell by the third inning if someone's not going to be there, and I'll text people. I'm like, just get a general admission ticket, get obstructed view, sneak in the park, do whatever you got to do. and you can get a seat for next to nothing.
Yeah, that'll be nice.
Very
Yeah,
nice.
so you'll for those of you who think we're hot shit, we will both be there at some point
That's
this
all
week.
Jordan. That's
So
all Jordan. Jordan's a hot shit. I'm not. It's all Jordan.
I
It's all Jordan.
I ain't shit. I ain't shit. The only thing I'm shit is I'm a shit poster on Twitter for the Red Sox now. But yeah, it should be a good series. I think if they can come away, I think it's a 3-gamer, so they can come away with 2. Um, feel really good about them. I think offhand, I know I mentioned that I didn't update my power rankings. I probably have the Red Sox at 13th. I think I debuted them at 16 or 17. They
Okay.
really impressed me with their arms in Seattle. Who knows what that lineup looks like in 2 months, and it might reflect much more poorly on the rotation. But Houck especially has been awesome. Their flurry of power, hopefully they spread it out a little bit more. They're not either 5 home runs or 1 run total moving forward, but I think they'll probably move up into at least into my top 15, if not top 13 or 12.
Sounds all
But
right.
yeah, so we're coming up on an hour and 15. That's what we did last episode. So we'll be here again next Sunday. Hopefully after another good week of Red Sox baseball. Hopefully they sweep the Orioles and they exceed expectations, but realistically, you always look for series wins as opposed to expecting sweeps. Except Kevin absolutely nailed the Oakland series by demanding a sweep and saying he wanted one and they got him one. So maybe I should be more like Kevin. We all should be more like Kevin. Kevin's we all should be more like Kevin. Everyone should strive to be more like Kevin. So for Brian and Tim, wherever he is now that his phone is dead, he is in the shadow realm. That'll do it for this episode. We'll see you guys next week. We have the Minors show coming out Tuesday. Major League show was an early release this week. I think it came out Wednesday. It'll probably be Thursday or Friday this week. And then you'll have us again next Sunday. So for everybody, again, presented by Beyond the Monster, this has been the Pesky Report. Peace out, everybody.